In less than 48 hours, the PlayStation 5 as you know it will cost more. But that is only the beginning of the story. If you were to walk past the Sony flagship store in New York City tonight, you might see the flickering neon lights reflecting off the pavement, but behind those glass walls, a tectonic shift is currently underway as we speak. Price tags are being swapped, digital listings updated, and the very foundation of how we play is being dismantled. This is not a simple case of rising production costs. This is the first step in a disruptive plan to kill the traditional console. Sony just changed something that no one expected to happen so abruptly, and if you aren't prepared, you are going to be left behind in a landscape that no longer values the plastic box sitting under your television and the physical media within. Sony Interactive Entertainment, led by its global hardware and service divisions, has officially fired a shot that will echo through North America across the nation. We are witnessing a strategic price increase for the PlayStation 5 in the United States, coinciding with the launch of a dedicated mobile cloud gaming platform. This is not a slow rollout. For new retail shipments, these changes are effective immediately, and the cloud services become operational over the next 48 hours. While the world watches, impact reports are flooding in from New York's massive retail hubs, from Union Square to Midtown. The question is why Sony would choose this moment during relative market stability to hike the cost of entry for its most successful machine and risk consumer backlash. This is the beginning of a new era. The answer lies in a fundamental pivot of their business model. Sony is moving away from the hardware-dependent profit margins that define previous eras, shifting instead toward a subscription-based ecosystem. This is a direct offensive designed to compete with Microsoft's Xbox Cloud Gaming and the massive gravity of Game Pass. For years, the console was the center of the gaming universe. Now, it is becoming a gateway, or perhaps a barrier, that Sony is willing to adjust to filter its audience. By raising the hardware price while making the library available via the cloud on mobile devices, Sony is sending a message. The hardware is now a luxury enthusiast item, but the ecosystem is the mandatory future for all. This shift will redefine how we consume entertainment daily. This transition is felt most acutely in the financial districts of New York, where analysts see this as a way to bolster service revenue at the expense of retail volume. They aren't just selling a machine anymore, they are selling a ticket into a digital world that lives on servers rather than discs. Imagine the scene at the Madison Avenue flagship store. Staff are working late, adjusting displays for a product that now carries a premium price in a market that remained insulated from global hikes for nearly 2 years. For 18 months, US consumers were protected while Europe and Japan saw prices climb. That protection has ended. The American market is no longer a safe haven for the standard consumer. The new pricing for the PlayStation 5 Slim and Digital Edition isn't just a reaction to the supply chain, it is a declaration of long-term value. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Meanwhile, data centers across New York are humming with unprecedented activity as they prepare to stream high-fidelity games directly to smartphones. These servers are the new consoles, powering a seamless 4K mobile experience designed to lure gamers into a portable, recurring revenue model. This pivot is a high-stakes gamble on the future of entertainment. Sony is betting that brand loyalty will survive a significant price hike if they offer a futuristic alternative. The hardware wars are no longer about raw processor speed. They are about who can capture the user's attention on every single screen they own. If you want to stay ahead of the hardware wars, listen closely, because the era of the physical console is ending faster than anyone dared to imagine. To understand why Sony is making this pivot in the heart of New York's retail landscape, we must look back to November 2020. The PlayStation 5 launched into a world defined by uncertainty and a global pandemic that paralyzed supply chains. The Silicon Lottery became a reality for millions of gamers who spent months refreshing browser tabs to secure a unit from retailers like Best Buy or B&H Photo. For those early years, the console itself was a mythical object, a piece of high-end hardware that Sony was arguably selling at a loss. Historically, the model for PlayStation followed a predictable trajectory: build a powerful box, sell it at a subsidized price to get it into living rooms, and recoup the investment through high-margin software sales. This strategy served the industry for decades, creating a massive installed base that Sony could then monetize through exclusive titles. The chip shortage intensified this dynamic as every unit manufactured was precious, and the secondary market saw prices skyrocket due to scarcity. Sony remained patient, absorbing the costs of production while waiting for the global economy to stabilize. However, the economic wind shifted faster than the manufacturing lines could adapt. While the United States remained a fortress of price stability for a long time, the rest of the world began to feel the pressure of inflation much sooner. Over the last 18 months, Sony systematically raised the price of the PlayStation 5 in key markets including Europe, Japan, and Canada. In Tokyo and London, the console became a more expensive luxury while American consumers enjoyed the original launch price. This discrepancy was a calculated effort by Sony's leadership to maintain dominance in the most competitive gaming market on the planet, but the most recent New York financial reports painted a different picture for the last quarter. Rising logistics costs at the Port of New York, coupled with the increasing complexity of the semiconductor market, finally made the $500 price point unsustainable. The insulation of the North American market had reached its breaking point. Sony's executives knew that continuing to subsidize the hardware in the US would eventually bleed the funds needed for the next leap in technology. While Sony focused on hardware logistics, their primary rival, Microsoft, was busy rewriting the rules. The rise of Xbox Game Pass introduced a consumption model that threatened to make the traditional $70 game purchase obsolete. Microsoft's strategy was clear. The hardware is secondary to the service. They were willing to lose the console sales war if it meant winning the subscription war. Sony watched from the sidelines as the Netflixification of gaming took hold. Seeing devices like the Steam Deck and even their own PlayStation Portal proved that gamers were increasingly hungry for portable experiences that didn't require being tethered to a living room. The success of these mobile-centric devices signaled a shift in consumer behavior that Sony could no longer ignore. The PlayStation Portal, initially dismissed as a niche accessory, confirmed that the audience was ready to untether from the home console and move toward a more fluid, digital-first experience. This realization led to the strategic shift we see today. Sony recognized they were playing a defensive game, trying to protect a hardware-first legacy in a world moving toward cloud services. By maintaining the status quo, they risked becoming obsolete while Microsoft and Valve built the digital future. The decision to finally hike the price in the United States is the end of that defensive posture. It marks a transition where hardware is no longer the primary driver, but a premium entry point. Financial analysts in Manhattan note that Sony's margins will improve as they shed the burden of subsidizing every box sold in North America. This is a declaration that the physical console is moving into luxury tech. Sony is intentionally pricing the console out of the impulse buy category to steer the masses toward cloud initiatives. They have spent years observing how players embrace subscription tiers. The data showed that modern gamers value access over physical ownership. The legacy of the PS5 is ending as a calculated push into the digital ether. They have moved the fight to the cloud to control the experience without manufacturing overhead. Sony watched the market change for 3 long years, tracking the success of Game Pass and the Steam Deck. They have finally decided to stop playing defense, but their next massive move is going to really hurt your wallet. The financial shockwaves are currently reverberating through the narrow, crowded corridors of New York's retail landscape, where the price of entry into the PlayStation ecosystem has just undergone a radical and controversial transformation. If you stroll past the neon-lit windows of the major electronics hubs in Midtown, or check the digital inventory at B&H Photo's massive distribution center, the data points to a painful new reality for the American gamer. The PlayStation 5 Slim, which previously held a firm grip on the $500 price point, has officially crossed the threshold into $550. Its more streamlined counterpart, the Digital Edition, which many consumers viewed as the last bastion of affordable high-end gaming at $400, has seen its MSRP climb to $450. This 10% jump might seem incremental on a corporate spreadsheet, but on the ground in a city like New York, where every dollar is contested by rising costs, it is a seismic shift in the value proposition of the medium. The data break reveals a fascinating disparity between the manufacturer's suggested retail price and the actual street price currently found in the wild. While national chains are forced to update their systems immediately to reflect Sony's new directives, smaller independent shops throughout the 5 boroughs are caught in a frantic transition. Some are honoring old prices to clear out existing stock-keeping units, while others have already inflated their tags to match the expected replacement costs. This has sparked a state of high-stakes urgency among the local gaming community that feels more like a stock market panic than a hardware cycle. The last chance window is closing with brutal speed. Shoppers who were once content to wait for a holiday sale are now scouring shelves from Queens to the Bronx, desperate to secure a console before the old stock inventory evaporates entirely. The secondary markets, including platforms like eBay and StockX, have already factored in the news. Resale prices for new in-box units have spiked, as scalpers recognize that the baseline for a retail purchase has been permanently raised, making the hunt for a bargain nearly impossible for the average enthusiast trying to beat the hike. The reaction from the public has been nothing short of explosive. On social media and within the digital trenches of gaming forums like Reddit and Reset Era, the sentiment is one of profound frustration and confusion. This is an unprecedented mid-cycle price hike for the North American market, a region that historically sees prices drop as hardware matures and manufacturing efficiencies are realized. Sony is citing a complex web of supply chain challenges, fluctuating logistics costs at the Port of New York, and the persistent global inflation pressure as the primary drivers for this decision. Yet, many seasoned observers and New York-based financial analysts see a different narrative unfolding between the lines of the official press releases. They suggest that this isn't just about covering the cost of silicon and shipping containers. It is about protecting profit margins as Sony prepares for a massive transition in their business model. Even local New York developers are noticing the shift, as the cost of development hardware and consumer accessibility begins to impact the long-term projections for their upcoming titles in this shifting economic climate. This strategic move places the PlayStation 5 in a new category of consumer goods. It is no longer being marketed as a common household appliance or a simple toy. It is being repositioned as a premium tech device, much like a flagship smartphone or a professional-grade laptop. This shift in the urgency factor is a calculated test of brand strength. Sony is betting that their library of exclusive titles is powerful enough to overcome the psychological barrier of a higher price tag. They are essentially asking their audience to pay more for hardware that is now several years old, a move that defies the traditional gravity of the tech industry. In the bustling electronics markets of Manhattan, this creates a palpable tension between the consumer's wallet and their desire for the latest experiences. Is the extra $50 merely a reflection of the current economy, or are consumers being asked to subsidize a future they didn't have a say in? As the retail landscape settles into this new, more expensive normal, it becomes clear that the hardware itself is becoming a secondary concern for the architects at Sony. They are looking beyond the box under the television, and the real reason for this price hike might be hidden within a secret project that has just been pushed live, signaling a turn that almost no one in the retail sector saw coming. This pivot suggests that the hardware is simply the first piece of a much larger puzzle designed to change how you play forever, leaving many to wonder if the physical console is being phased out intentionally to make way for something far more portable and digital. The atmosphere in the boutiques of New York and the sleek showrooms of Midtown is shifting in a way that signals a permanent change in the gaming landscape. There is a quiet, calculated realization among industry insiders that the standard PlayStation 5 is no longer the untouchable pinnacle of home entertainment, but rather the new baseline in a tiered ecosystem. This mid-generation shift is anchored by the looming shadow of the PlayStation 5 Pro, a device that has moved from the realm of internet rumors into the reality of developer briefings held in the high-rise offices of Manhattan. By raising the price of the base models now, Sony is effectively recalibrating the entire hierarchy of their hardware. If the slim model now commands $550, it creates a strategic price floor that allows the upcoming Pro iteration to sit comfortably at a much higher premium without appearing like a radical outlier. This is a classic move in consumer electronics, where the existing product is pushed into a budget slot even as its price climbs. Sony is no longer competing with the plastic consoles of the late 90s. They compete with the polished aluminum of professional laptops. The marketing language from Sony's global hardware divisions has undergone a profound transformation. They are framing the PlayStation 5 not as a toy for the masses, but as premium tech, a phrase carefully chosen to resonate with the affluent demographic frequenting their flagship stores. This isn't an appliance you hide in a cabinet. It is a centerpiece of a modern digital lifestyle. Financial analysts on Wall Street are observing this pivot with interest, suggesting that Sony believes their hardware is still significantly undervalued at its current price point when compared to the raw computing power it provides. When you analyze the sophisticated internal components, The manufacturing costs remain high despite years of production. Sony's leadership argues that to maintain the level of innovation their audience expects, the old model of deep hardware subsidies must die. They are looking at the massive research and development costs required to stay ahead of the technological curve and deciding that the consumer must share a more significant portion of that financial burden up front. This brings us to the widening technical gap that defines the modern industry as we look toward the horizon of the gaming medium. The computational demands of upcoming titles are reaching a critical breaking point. Nowhere is this more evident than in the anticipation surrounding Grand Theft Auto VI, a game expected to push current hardware to its limit and redefine open-world immersion. Developers in New York's thriving AAA scenes are already grappling with the reality that the base PlayStation 5 might struggle to maintain the highest performance for these future behemoths. By raising prices and preparing the market for a more powerful Pro model, Sony is creating a financial cushion to fund the next leap in silicon architecture. They are essentially charging a future-proofing tax, ensuring they have the capital to continue refining their hardware integration. The logic is cold, precise, and calculated. If you want the absolute best experience for the biggest games of the decade, you must be willing to pay the premium for the machine that can deliver it. However, there is a deeper, more ironic strategy at play within the offices of Sony's New York headquarters. While refining hardware prestige, they are also laying the groundwork for its eventual obsolescence. The hardware is getting more expensive, which is a deliberate move to create friction for the casual buyer. By positioning the console as a luxury item for the enthusiast class, they create a void for an accessible, lower-cost alternative that does not require a physical box. They are betting that many in the population will eventually balk at such a high hardware investment and look for another way into the PlayStation ecosystem. Sony wants you to stop obsessing over the physical box. They are intentionally making the hardware a difficult financial choice to prepare you for the big turn no one saw coming. The hardware is simply the physical anchor for a vast digital ecosystem, but the real future they are building is one where the physical console is entirely optional and accessible everywhere. The high-stakes gamble of increasing hardware prices isn't just a simple reaction to shifting manufacturing costs. It is the opening act of a much more ambitious and calculated play. While the tech world was busy debating the $50 increase across New York's primary electronics hubs, Sony was quietly flipping the switch on a project that renders the physical console secondary for the first time in history. This is the official launch of the high-end mobile cloud gaming integration, a move that fundamentally changes the relationship between a player and their screen. No longer tethered to a bulky box under a television, the PlayStation experience is being liberated, moving directly into the pockets of millions through iOS and Android devices. This isn't merely a small update, it is a declaration that the ecosystem is expanding beyond the living room. Unlike the previous Remote Play feature, which acted as a digital mirror requiring a local PlayStation 5 to be powered on and connected to the internet, this new cloud infrastructure operates entirely independently. It is a true server-side revolution that redefines portability. Sony has strategically leveraged massive data centers located right here in the New York metropolitan area to ensure that latency, the mortal enemy of streaming, is virtually non-existent for the massive East Coast player base. For a gamer commuting on the subway or sitting in a park in Manhattan, the responsiveness of the controls now rivals that of a local machine. By placing the computing power in these local hubs, Sony is effectively bypassing the limitations of home hardware, providing a seamless bridge between mobile interfaces and the high-fidelity worlds of their flagship titles. The technical specifications of this rollout are truly staggering. For the first time in the industry, Sony is bringing 4K streaming capabilities to mobile devices. This isn't the blurry, compressed video often associated with early cloud attempts. It is a high bitrate, crystal-clear presentation that utilizes the advanced display technology found in modern flagship smartphones. This leap in quality is what justifies the premium tech branding we've been seeing in Midtown showrooms recently. To achieve this, Sony has overhauled its global server architecture, ensuring that the hardware in their data centers is essentially a massive distributed version of the PS5's capabilities. They are democratizing high-end performance by taking the burden of cooling, power, and storage off the user and placing it directly into the cloud. Central to this entire shift is the deep integration with the PlayStation Plus premium tier. This isn't a standalone app you buy once. It is the ultimate fulfillment of the subscription-based model that the industry has been chasing for years. Sony is introducing the instant access feature, a paradigm shift that allows subscribers to play any PS5 game they already own, and a massive library of titles they don't without ever touching a piece of physical hardware. Your library is no longer a stack of plastic or a list of files on a hard drive. It is a persistent digital presence accessible through any compatible screen. In the high-speed economy of New York, where time is the most valuable commodity, the ability to jump into a blockbuster game within seconds of a digital purchase, without waiting for massive downloads or hardware boots, is a total game changer. This subscription ecosystem is the true heart of Sony's long-term survival strategy. By bundling 4K cloud streaming into the highest tier of their service, they are creating a powerful incentive for players to abandon the one-time purchase model in favor of a recurring, high-margin revenue stream. For Sony, the math is simple. Selling a console at a loss or thin margin is a significant risk, but securing a monthly fee from a user who uses their own mobile hardware is pure profit. The retail giants of New York are watching this transition with a mix of awe and anxiety. If the phone in a customer's pocket becomes a PlayStation, what happens to the rows of physical controllers and consoles on the shelves? The implications for the gaming community are profound and lasting. We are witnessing the first real step toward a post-console world. While the hardware enthusiasts will still flock to the PS5 Pro for the absolute peak of local performance, the vast majority of the market is being nudged toward this digital horizon. Sony is building a world where the brand name PlayStation no longer refers to a specific piece of hardware, but to a service that lives on your phone, your tablet, and your smart TV. This isn't just an add-on meant to supplement your gaming experience. It is a strategic replacement for the traditional entry point. The narrative that you need a $500 box to join the PlayStation community is being dismantled in real time. This pivot is the big turn that changes the trajectory of the entire industry. Sony isn't just selling you a more expensive machine. They are building a world where you don't actually need the machine at all to experience their greatest worlds. This isn't an add-on. This is a replacement. Sony is building a world where you don't need a PS5 to play PS5 games. The shift in strategy highlights a cold, calculated reality that the era of the traditional console cycle is being dismantled by the very company that once perfected it. Sony is no longer content with the razor-thin margins and massive risks associated with physical hardware manufacturing. In the glass-walled boardrooms overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the conversation has moved from units shipped to long-term engagement metrics. The logic driving this change is simple yet brutal for the consumer to hear. Hardware makes pennies, subscriptions make billions. By raising the price of the PlayStation 5 in the United States, Sony is intentionally creating a friction point for the physical entry into their world. They are signaling that the console is becoming a boutique enthusiast product, a high-end luxury item for those who insist on local processing power. For the mass market, the message is clear. Why pay more for a box when you can pay less for the service? This is a deliberate push to convert the casual consumer into a permanent cloud subscriber, securing a steady stream of recurring revenue that isn't vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, silicon shortages, or shipping bottlenecks. The eroding walls of exclusivity represent the second major pillar of this transformation. For decades, the only on PlayStation brand was a fortress, a walled garden that forced players to buy specific hardware to access iconic titles. But that fortress is being dismantled piece by piece. Sony's aggressive expansion into the PC market was the first crack in the wall. The launch of high-fidelity mobile cloud gaming is the total collapse of the perimeter. This multi-platform future is about capturing the billions of screens that already exist in the world today. From the perspective of local New York developers, this shift is revolutionary. Studios in the city's tech hubs are now designing games that must be as legible and responsive on a high-definition mobile screen as they are on a 70-inch television in a dedicated media room. These creators, working from lofts in Dumbo and offices in the Flatiron District, are the ones tasked with making this transition invisible to the user. They are bridging the gap between hardware limitations and cloud potential, ensuring the experience remains premium regardless of the device. The global gaming economy is shifting from a hardware-first model to a content-first model. Where the brand is the ecosystem, not the plastic device sitting under the TV, this move effectively neutralizes the primary barrier to entry for millions of potential players who would never consider a $500 hardware investment, but would happily pay a monthly fee to experience blockbuster narratives on their existing mobile devices. This strategic pivot places Sony in a direct, high-stakes collision course with Microsoft. For years, Xbox has been the primary advocate for a play-anywhere philosophy, leveraging the massive power of their Game Pass ecosystem to gain a foothold in homes without consoles. By launching a 4K cloud service that integrates directly with a player's existing digital library, Sony is no longer just defending its turf. They are launching a full-scale counteroffensive. The competitive repercussions will be felt across every retail hub in North America. Microsoft now faces a difficult choice. Do they lower their hardware prices to exploit the gap left by Sony's price hike, or do they follow the luxury trend to protect their own profit margins? This pressure extends to Nintendo as well. As the industry moves toward cloud dominance, the House of Mario remains a fascinating outlier, with rumors of a Switch successor swirling through the streets of Manhattan and the digital forums of the world. The question is no longer just about graphical power, but about whether Nintendo can continue to thrive in a world where their rivals are turning every smartphone into a high-end gaming station. The move to cloud infrastructure isn't just about convenience, it's about control. In a physical world, a used game can be sold, a console can be modified, and a player can exist outside of the corporate digital network. In the cloud subscription future Sony is building, every interaction is tracked, every session is monetized, and the very concept of ownership is replaced by a temporary license to play. This is the reality that is beginning to settle over the enthusiasts and collectors who have spent decades building physical libraries. The big reveal of Sony's 10-year plan isn't just about a new service or a higher price tag. It is about a fundamental shift in the power dynamic between the creator and the consumer. All of this points to one terrifying reality for collectors. The big reveal of Sony's 10-year plan starts right now. The realization settling over the tech industry is that the PlayStation 5 price hike in the United States was never a simple defensive maneuver against inflation. It was a strategic deterrent, a calculated move to signal the end of the subsidized console era. By making the physical hardware more expensive at a time when traditional consumer electronics usually see price drops, Sony is intentionally repositioning the PlayStation 5 as a luxury enthusiast item. This transition is designed to force the mass market, the millions of casual players who just want to experience the latest blockbuster, toward the high-margin world of the cloud. In this new hierarchy, the console becomes a premium status symbol for those who demand native 4K local processing, while the cloud service becomes the accessible, default standard for everyone else. This behavioral engineering is most visible in the retail hubs of Manhattan, where the cost of entry is now a significant hurdle for new gamers. Sony is betting that when a consumer is faced with a $500+ investment for a plastic box, the alternative of a $20 monthly subscription accessible on their existing smartphone or tablet becomes an irresistible proposition. This is the heart of the revelation. Sony is no longer trying to put a console in every home. They are trying to put a PlayStation account on every screen. The strategic shift suggests that the PlayStation 6 might not arrive as a physical device at all. Instead, the future points toward a PlayStation app being pre-installed on every Sony Bravia television and integrated into the operating systems of major smartphone manufacturers. In this vision, the console is nothing more than a server rack in a data center in New Jersey, delivering high-fidelity gaming to a screen in the palm of your hand as you ride the subway through the boroughs. We are already seeing the first steps of this hardware-light future. Upcoming software showcases from Sony's worldwide studios are expected to pivot away from technical demos focused on SSD speeds and ray tracing hardware. Instead, the focus will shift toward play-anywhere features, demonstrating how a player can start a session on their high-end PS5 Pro in the living room and continue it seamlessly on a mobile device while traveling. The hardware is being relegated to a secondary role, acting as a high-fidelity anchor for a cloud-first ecosystem. For the developers based in New York's Silicon Alley, this means a shift in how games are optimized. They are no longer just building for one specific set of hardware specifications. They are building for a scalable cloud architecture that can deliver a premium experience to a diverse range of devices. devices. The 10-year plan is now coming into focus. Sony is moving away from the risky, cyclical nature of hardware manufacturing and toward the stable, predictable revenue of a service-based economy. This transformation mirrors the shifts seen in the music and film industries, where the physical medium became a niche market for collectors while the masses moved to streaming. By raising the price of the PS5 now, Sony is essentially preparing the market for the eventual disappearance of the console as a mainstream necessity. They are training their audience to value the service over the hardware, ensuring that when the time comes to transition to a cloud-only model, the consumer base will already be acclimated to the subscription lifestyle. This is how empires adapt, by redefining the terms of their survival. The question for the gaming community is no longer about which console has the better exclusive titles or the more powerful GPU. The question is about the nature of ownership and the future of the medium itself. As the 48-hour transition window closes and the new pricing becomes standard in New York and across the nation, the industry stands at a permanent crossroads. The game is changing and the rules of engagement are being rewritten by a company that is no longer satisfied with being a hardware manufacturer. Sony is evolving into a platform that exists everywhere and nowhere at once. Would you stop buying consoles forever if you could play every PlayStation 5 game perfectly on your phone for a monthly fee? Or is there a tactile, irreplaceable value in owning the physical machine that no amount of cloud convenience can replicate? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you rushing to buy a PlayStation 5 now before the higher prices become the permanent reality? Or are you ready to skip the hardware and wait for the cloud to take over? The era of the physical console is ending and the digital horizon is wider than ever. Don't get left behind as the landscape shifts. I am your narrator and I will see you in the cloud.